Good afternoon and welcome to this month's webinar, Beyond Big Data, Mining Content for Business Value. We're delighted to see you all here. We will be running this broadcast in broadcast mode, so your phones are all muted. We invite you to ask questions as they occur to you on the GoToMeeting console. There is a question box. You can type your question in there. We will address the questions at the end of the broadcast. And we invite you to follow us on Twitter at @smartlogic_com and share your comments on this webinar using the hashtag #WeSolveBigData. My name is Anne Lapkin, and I am the Vice President of Strategy and Marketing at Smartlogic, and with me today is Phil Lanzafame, who is the IT Director for Knowledge Solutions at Sentara Healthcare. Phil has been with Santara for 27 years in various positions of leadership, providing innovative strategies that combine digital communications and information technology, and he is responsible for defining the new applications that expand the value of structured and unstructured data at Sentara. His current projects involve the utilization of semantic technologies in the area of information management, search, and process improvement. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about the broader opportunity. We're going to talk about how metadata actually helps you to manage and extract value from your information assets. Then I'm going to turn it over to Phil. He's going to talk a bit about Sentara, their specific business opportunity, the solution they came up with, the lessons learned, and the new opportunities that they see going forward. And then we'll move to Q&A. But before we do that, I'd like to get a sense of who's in the audience. So I'm going to launch a short poll, and if you could choose one of the options, whether you are in healthcare and life sciences, financial services and insurance, manufacturing, government, or the ubiquitous other. Okay then. So we have 21% of the audience from healthcare and life sciences and 58% from other, because GoToWebinar only allows us 5 choices. We hope that you'll find this webinar useful, and we look forward to your questions at the end. So, the opportunity. We at Smartlogic believe that there is a huge amount of business value locked away in the content that you have in your organization. It contains the majority of the human intelligence in your organization, the records of what people are thinking, what their opinions are, what conclusions they've reached based on different types of data. And we also believe that organizations that unlock that value can outperform competitors in their market. But in order to be able to do that, you need to understand the content and the information and knowledge that it contains. And the only way to do that is with metadata. Now, metadata is not found under a cabbage leaf. There is no metadata pixie fairy sprinkling metadata all over all of your assets. We know that asking people to tag content when they're committing it is not a useful exercise because, number one, they don't do it. Number two, if they do it, they do it from their own perspectives, which makes the metadata inconsistent. Number three, there's probably not a human being on the planet who can take a 50-page document and tag it with all of the things that that document is about, all of the interesting facts, all of the entities, all of the relationships, and so on and so forth. So in order to describe your content completely and consistently, you must be able to find a way to make that metadata happen. And Gartner actually agrees with us. Gartner has said that by 2018, machine-generated metadata will be integral to discovering 50% of the new digital business revenue streams. So being able to use your information to create value for your organization, use your information to improve the efficiency of your business processes, that's all going to come from metadata, and the metadata has to come from somewhere. So how does metadata help? Well, you can use it to intelligently audit, archive, and migrate your content. Most of the metadata that's appended to content is very sparse and not particularly informative. It's things like the file name, the date that it was created, and potentially the author. In order to be able to audit content or archive it, you need to be able to know what's in the content, and it's better to have a machine providing you with that service than trying to do it by yourself. You can secure sensitive content that has personally identifiable information, which, as Phil will tell you, is a big deal in healthcare and in many other industries. You can use it to identify documents that contain trade secrets or competitive intelligence that you want to secure and not to widely distribute. You can actually automate your records management program so that you're managing records based on what's in the content. You can drive workflow and case management based on the actual contents of a document. Most manually content-intensive workflows are driven by a human opening a document, reading it, and deciding what to do. If you can actually extract the relevant facts, entities, and relationships from those documents and use that to drive your workflow, then you can make your process more efficient, less error-prone, and you can improve the quality of what you're doing. You can use metadata to harmonize your data, to actually resolve conflicts in metadata between different disparate systems, to provide a single semantic umbrella under which you can manage all of your information irrespective of the source. You can more easily find and discover information and expertise. If your information assets are properly tagged with all of the metadata that's relevant to them, it becomes much easier to discover the information that you already have in your organization and to be able to discover information that is publicly published that you need to do your jobs. You can use metadata to drive better customer service, providing the ability for people in your support center to more easily discover the information assets that they need and actually to expose those to your customers in a self-service model. You can extract information from your information assets to drive business intelligence and to combine that with the information traditionally used in business intelligence to answer questions that you couldn't answer before. And then, of course, you can monetize your information assets if you have the right kind of metadata to be able to drive extreme personalization and to be able to drive many different types of usage. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil to talk a bit about Sentara, who they are and what they've done. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Anne. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on your location. And what you see on the screen is the beginning of my story of where we're at now. That's been a long journey. And what you see of the information on the slide here represents a very complex, very multi-business oriented operation, and not just in healthcare, but Sentara is known as an integrated healthcare provider, which means we have all the services related to healthcare, including long-term stay, ambulance services, physicians, and a insurance company. So inside of that, what you're representing then is a tremendous amount of information, knowledge-intensive industry that knowledge takes a lot of forms, both data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured information. The difference is, and my colleagues that have identified themselves in healthcare understand that we are in a life and death business. And the business we're in is dependent totally, in this case, of our age on digital information that is both put on by individuals and received by individuals that are making decisions daily both on business and operations and on clinical services. So we take it very seriously. The other salient point to understand about healthcare is that 80% of our employees do not sit in front of a computer. They are not knowledge experts. They are not search experts. They are there to serve the patients and make sure that we fulfill our mission of delivering and improving health every day. So we have a very unique situation of people working 24/7 and a very mission-critical aspect of the organization. My contribution over the last 20 years has been to develop a centralized employee portal repository knowledge structure. We've done a pretty good job of it. Over the last 20 years, we've automated and made almost every aspect of both in documents and functionality self-service. And so it's become mission critical to the organization. Every day we average 25,000 unique visitors to the site. And it's been working very well. In the last few years, though, we recognize, though, it's not enough just to put the information up there. We have to make it findable, relevant, and available quickly to the people that are using it, the employees. So moving that from a structured portal of links and navigation to a knowledge portal is our next challenge. So how it began back in 2013, even before then, we experimented with a number of different aspects of search. Currently, the portal is hosted on SharePoint 2010. We were using the native SharePoint search. We tried the Google appliance. And the frustration has been that basically the employees have pretty much abandoned search as a functional aspect to find anything. They'd rather try wandering around and looking on their own than trying to use the search. So the other part we tried is having people tag their documents, which is very frustrating, and they don't have access to know the metadata. It's inconsistent, so we really came to the conclusion that we needed a self-describing way of people that submitted documents or data or reports or whatever the case may be, that could be indexed dynamically against a set of structured metadata terms, relationships, and then that could be searchable intuitively and intelligently using the same terms based on the different disciplines of the organization. So in 2013, we did put the first iteration of the Semaphore, Smartlogic Semaphore product in, and we used it very judiciously, and the point we were trying to make is to show that it worked, the point that it showed value. So we were coming up to the open enrollment season. If you know what that is, that's when all the employees and all employees have to make decisions on the insurance components that they take. So we thought we'd use that opportunity to utilize the search, and we worked very closely with the benefits folks, and we carefully curated their documents and added the metadata of all the esoteric insurance information in terms of dental and health and all the things you do, and embedded that into the first iteration of Semaphore Search. It was a whole new paradigm and exposed the whole organization at one time to using it in a very pragmatic and straightforward approach. The results were very, very well done. I mean, it was the people, both the benefits people enjoyed it because what they saw was a tremendous reduction in calls that they had to respond to that they documented over previous years. And the customers enjoyed it because they can self-service more closely because most of the people, again, are either working from home or working odd shifts, so they can actually find the information they needed. From there, we expanded it to other payroll information, wellness information, but it was still in the role of employee self-service and internal information. So very quickly after that in 2013, we ran into an opportunity that was presented by our CIO. And the problem he was trying to deal with was we had a new chief medical officer that was new to the organization. And starting 10 years ago, when Sentara put in the electronic medical record, we were able to generate a lot of reports, dashboards, KPIs, so forth, that were available on the portal. The problem is he couldn't find them. And the issue was they're scattered over different applications and different repositories and so forth. But the real problem was that the wording was so esoteric that no one knew what they were called because they were built by report writers or used some of the metadata from the reports that wasn't readily apparent. So the CIO asked us briefly, he said, would you try doing this with your search product? And, you know, it was something new. We never say no to the CIO, so we took a shot at it. Anyway, we did an offline version, so we didn't want to, you know, get into our existing production system with SharePoint. So we did an offline development along with Smartlogic to help us. And we really had to figure out then how to use the metadata from the reports to act like content and make that searchable. So we took about 3 weeks and did a very quick proof of concept, presented it back to the CIO, and he really thought it was the way to go, that this was going to be a good solution. So after that, we moved on in 2015 and to build out a fairly production-ready, secure, and stable environment that we can begin to extend and build on these reports. So from there, what we've done with it is taken it around, showed the various hospital executives, got a lot of support, got a lot of good feedback, and they encouraged us to essentially industrialize it and expand it to the rest of the reports and a lot of different inventories that you'll see coming up shortly. So in 2016, our project is to then, we'll call harden that. We're taking it off of the SharePoint platform. We're moving to the SolarLucene Works platform with the development test environments, and we're moving to the Semaphore 4.0 Ontology Manager, which gives us a lot more leverage and flexibility and extending the ontology. So here's what really, when you look at the title of this, Beyond Big Data, really means is we have big data, we have lots of data, we have lots of reports. Essentially, we can't find them, and that's not a deficit to the people who made them and the millions of dollars and the investment of people and process and information that we put into it. It's just that everyone does it a little differently, puts them in a little different place, and calls them something different, depending on some of the different domains or the expertise, clinical, financial, health insurance. Essentially, they all use their own language to build the reports and then expect people to find those. The other issue then is they're not all in the same place and they're not always in the same format. We have everything from SharePoint to PowerPoint in dashboards and KPIs, and they're put in different places. So we have to be able to navigate and search these different repositories through all these different languages that make it meaningful to the people that are looking for them. And I think we're on a good path and have a way forward to do that with the technology and the experience we've developed. I think we're ready for another poll. And just to get an idea if you guys have the same problem that we've been working on.
Okay then, here are the results of the poll. We asked if people have problems finding reports in their organization, and almost 10% of our lucky users can easily find everything that they need. 59% find that it's a challenge, and 31% say that it is impossible to find everything they need.
So it sounds like we share a common problem, and the problem is not only going away or getting better, it's getting worse, because the amount of information is increasing daily and the amount of information is coming in from outside the organization. But the realization that I came to, that you really can't deal with the information or the problems incrementally, you have to look at it holistically. And we had to step back a little bit and look at it. And instead of what we're saying to do is look at the entire organization as if it's one big library that needs to be sorted and categorized. Meaning, if we took all the brick and mortar away, if we took all the people and all the kind of variable distractions away, what we really have then is a very unstructured set of information which has no way of categorizing it, both by location, facility, nomenclature, date, time, who submitted it, department. And so the conclusion we came to is understanding that is we need an enterprise ontology. If you're not familiar with the word, it's a description of the organization, the business entities it represents, and the relationship between those. And so we worked with some vendors and did some things inside and put some librarians together. And so essentially we're looking at the organization in the sense that you would as a very large body of information that needs to be cataloged, curated, and then be searchable. This image that you see on the screen, because a lot of this information, ontologies, taxonomy, and which I call the language of data, is often missed on people that have not understand it from either linguistic or library science or data science. And quite frankly, that's not my background in any of those disciplines, but I've learned to adapt to them, and having been exposed to a number of different languages, you realize that language is the human way of representing concepts, ideas, and ultimately information. And it isn't come, as Anne said previously, it doesn't come with the data and it doesn't come with the metadata, and you have to interpret it. So just kind of walking through some of these examples here that I help internally clarify this concept is you have something as simple as salt. And we all use salt, it's a flavoring, but it's also a chemical, and it's also used in industry, and it also has many names to it. And you can have rock salt if you're making ice cream or want to clean up your snow on the street or whatever. You have sea salt, which has become very popular in different ingredients and chocolates and different things. But ultimately, the grounding of salt is in the concept that it actually has ingredients, which is sodium and chlorine, which is grounded in the periodic table, and that could be mixed with other enzymes, genes, temperatures, ingredients, and so forth to create much more complex products that salt would become just one component of it. And the way I just describe this to people that helps them understand this, maybe it's a little different. In the ontology world, you have a finite level of variables, but you have infinite combinations. And what it allows us to do is look at those variables very discretely, and then helps us to expand those to understand the concepts and the interaction between them. So let's move over to the concept of LOS. LOS is a healthcare term which represents a concept and a nomenclature in healthcare called length of stay. For all you guys that are out there multitasking, type in LOS into Google and you won't get length of stay. It's a meaningless term unless you have proprietary knowledge of understanding how it works in healthcare. Well, even the concept of LOS has many meanings to it. I mean, length of stay, hospital stay, inpatient duration, admissions. But from an ontological perspective, it's really grounded in the relationship of time and admission. You can't have a length of stay if you're not admitted and you have a certain amount of time. So it's a temporal relationship in an event which is grounded in the enterprise ontology. But then I can start mixing that with insurance claims, providers, other information on that. So how this works in the real world. So if you're a physician and you're interested in a report and your domain of information is heart surgery, you might run a report or look for a report and you type in the acronym CABG, C-A-B-A-G, which stands for cardiac artery bypass graft, something like that. Now again, if you typed it into Google, you will get that as a result, but you won't get it as a preferred term. So we have to deal with all these clinical acronyms and subsets and issues that we're dealing with this. Now here's a real world example of last year when we're dealing with the concept of Ebola. Well, Ebola is a disease, everyone knows what it is, but if you search by Ebola, you might be looking for a lot of other things like the policy on hazardous waste, you might be travel guidelines, you might want a lot of specific information that is associated with the concept of Ebola, but is not necessarily directly associated with that term. So what we're able to do is go into the Ontology Manager, model out those terms, define those other relationships of objects or documents or reports that are associated with that. What it's going to do then is that information is scanned and indexed. Those in a search for Ebola, you will see those related terms. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit how important the ontology is for managing the relationship. So I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots very specifically of the results of what we've been working on based upon the request that I told you about that the CIO asked for. We tried to make it very clean. Everest is our own internal brand. It's not a product. We wanted to give it some identity as people can refer to it. And it's illustrating on the screen right now of the concept of LOS and what that means and the relationship on searching by that. There's actually 4 different ways you can search within our report search model here. On the left-hand side is a navigation, and it's a semantic navigation that represents a library, and next to it you can see the number of reports that are in there, and it's expandable. And then you can also start typing in LOS, and this, I apologize, but it's hard to do a live demo while you're talking and this many people. But when you start typing in LOS, you're not just getting you're getting what's called the preferred terms. So you're getting all the relationships and definitions that are related to the concepts that we've modeled in the Ontology Manager that are related to LOS. Now, if you look on the bottom, you're also getting an item there that's called weight loss. Well, it's not related, but oftentimes because it's making the inference that LOS, you might be looking for something also regarding weight loss, even though it's not part of the concept of LOS. Very similar to if you many times you do a Google search and you're making your first guess and you find information that's not necessarily related to what you think you're looking for, but there was more relevant information on a different topic or related term. So this is an idea of what the ontology does and how it augments the search to find the information and guide you on a more detailed level of what you'll find inside of it. One of the features of Semaphore that a lot of people like is called visual navigation or the visualizer. And so going back to that concept of a library, behind the scenes, and I haven't shown you this, and we're not going to do it in this presentation, the Ontology Manager actually manages the relationship of the concepts and the information that's contained in there that you're referencing. So I can navigate that using this bubble chart here, and this is totally interactive. As I drill down on these different bubbles, it'll actually bring me in and take me to the next level and expand it accordingly. So I can visually navigate, which some people are much more inclined to do. And in the center, it shows me, the reports that are related to that, the thumbnails that are associated with it. And if you go further to the right, what you'll see then on the side is the related terms. So you might be looking for one report, and all of a sudden someone catches your eye. Well, I like that, but I like something different. So when you click on something like we're going to do here with the office visit follow-up with PCP on the next screen, you'll see then what happens is that becomes the new center of the search, and it's going to change then the relationship and give you a result that is relevant to that new search. But it constantly revises the library, so you get a new set of information, new set of related terms that you can drill down on. So that's where the ontology is driving the interaction with the data and guiding you through it in a human inner way that many people prefer to look at it this way. The other point is you can do a fully organic search using any terms you want. They might be classified, they might not, and essentially you'll be doing a keyword search at that point. So the thing we're trying to come to terms with is we are searching the template of the metadata of the reports, not the data in the reports. And why that's critical is a lot of these reports have restricted patient information that we don't want to expose to anyone that can search the reports. Now, in the old world, when these reports are maintained in their native systems, you can't get to a report unless you have security access to it. So you don't see the report. In a knowledge management world, you want people to see everything whether they have access to it or not. Otherwise, you don't know what's in the library. So what we do is we expose all of the metadata and all of the terms and relationships to people so they can find anything. But then you'll see over on the side the link to the report. If you have security access that's driven by Active Directory or other sources that you have, you can actually click in and see the full report, the data associated with, and things like that. I'm not going to do that because I'm not sure what's on the other side of this report. But what you'll see is all the attributes, all the elements that are included in the search, and then what we do with the ontology manager is overlay those with the local terms, the colloquial terms, related terms, and acronyms, synonyms, and anything else that's related. So that's what you were seeing in the search. So this is what the result is for this particular document. By the way, all these are coming out of our Clarity clinical data reporting system, which is part of the Epic electronic medical record. So I hope, in the brief time we have, what we're trying to understand here is then, if we have the library, how do we use the library? How do we use it to do mission critical work, find things easier, and through a natural language search that people are used to by the various different components they used to. And what we saw is that the ontology does organize the information. We don't have to touch it once it's defined. Any new information that's put in that can absorb those terms and relate to them is automatically categorized. But the critical thing is understanding domain by domain. And it's really language by language. And by understanding that, if you go into the business side of human resources, they have their own language, they have their own colloquialisms, they have their own way of responding to things. And then if you go over to the clinical side, and the hardest part of learning any new discipline, obviously, if in different aspects of education, is learning the vocabulary. So what we're learning the vocabulary. Some of it you can extract either from publicly available healthcare repositories and ontologies and so forth. But once you start building them, you understand there's relationships between them. And a great example of that is if you're on the clinical side, we call a person a patient. On the health plan side, that's a member. But they actually mean the same thing. So you start to see that a lot of things in the transactions and the words and the concepts, they actually mean the same thing, but they call them something different. So by going through it kind of piece by piece and looking at it separately, you actually start making the connections that you're really talking about the same thing, just using different vocabularies. And this is part technology. You can't take the technology out of the equation. But I think what we're trying to understand here in moving towards, and I would, in a light sense, artificial intelligence, is what is the library science and the information science behind this that allows us to make this seamless and transparent to the user. And combining that technology with the library science, what we're referring to in our internal team, a few people that are working on this, is knowledge engineering. Because there's the technology exists, the methodology exists, and we're just trying to put these pieces together in a new way that we believe is going to be the future and is going to be the way we manage all this disparate information. So what we've been doing out there is taking this around, showing it to people, they love it, and then you get a lot of excitement, you get a lot of requests for new activities and new processes. We have to focus on some things. Every once in a while, we're going to have to experiment and try different things, but it's important that we continue to build on what we know, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, because you don't want to get into, we'll call it the same dilemma we did with the other information, to make sure it's useful. But the thing that's really been encouraging, in a traditional sense, when people roll out major projects or applications, they usually post out there a very complex set of navigation of how you go through channels and folders to find their information. What we're seeing more and more in their documentation is just keywords that people are saying, search by such and such a term. So people are now getting more acquainted with search, they're depending on it, and they're getting more confident that it's giving them the information they need. So they're abandoning now the navigation and going directly to search, and people are starting to realize the value. This is very critical to us because getting them back in a sense that they are comfortable with the search has been very important, and really, I think, validates the whole issue and the process that we're working through. So what we're working on now, in addition to getting some of the confidence level that we're working with, So we were very confident that we can work with unstructured documents, tag those, manage those, make those searchable. We're starting to work with reports, understanding the metadata and the vocabulary associated with those. We also have an initiative going on with categorizing, searching people. So as we start understanding the individual, not just the domains, but the individual data sources, data types, we can start moving those together to be more integrated, that provide a larger set of knowledge. But I'm going to use one example that sometimes we also go after what I call targets of opportunity. And one of the things you see up here is a pharmacy newsletter. So one of the things I noticed that we had, one of the pharmacy educators was sending out via email an attachment that came from an external consulting company every 2 weeks with vital information regarding pharmaceuticals. And these were recalls, these were case studies, these were interventions, and all kinds of things that were actually very important to understanding the real-time information associated with drug and drug dosage and information. So what happens when you send something out with email, they're not durable, they're not searchable, and you may read it and then have the instance later on that you need that information. Well, it's short-lived. So we worked with them a little bit, and we started adding those metadata and putting the newsletters into a searchable environment, and so that now people can go directly and search by the reports and find them real time. And then we've categorized them by month, by day. We put some metadata on it based on what's in the report. So it gives us a whole different dimension of knowledge management. And I think that this illustrates the difference between sending out a static PDF and putting that into an environment where I can search by pharmacy directly and find the information I need by any number of other topics that are associated with it. So I think we have a great opportunity. This has been, we're just beginning. This has been a few years into it. We're learning the value of it, learning the technology. But, you know, I think the bottom line is what we find out, if there's a better way, we haven't found it to auto-categorize and allow information to be searchable.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So one last poll. How well does enterprise search work in your organization? Okay. So a whopping 7% of you say that it works pretty well. 63% say it needs improvement, and 30% say that it is absolutely, positively awful. And now we will move on to the question part of this broadcast. And we have some really, really good questions here. A lot of them focus around the ontology. So Phil, one question is, how long did it take to build the Sentara ontology? Who was involved, and what skills were needed?
Great question. We commissioned in 2012 with an external vendor, an external healthcare global ontology, enterprise ontology, which is now been copyrighted, that we use as our baseline for doing this. So how long did it take? We held multidisciplinary meetings inside, meaning that combination of business leaders, depending on the topic. There was 12 different topics, 12 different meetings, consisting of 3 hours of interactive with the external vendor in establishing a formal upper-level OWL ontology that is both human readable and machine readable, that we can use to leverage and export to the lower-level ontologies that can be embedded in Semaphore or other products. So it was a deliberate attempt to validate the question and bring it out all at one point. Now, it doesn't have to be done like that. There's a lot of ways to build it incrementally. There's a lot of resources out there, but there's also a learning curve of understanding the relationship between the ontology, the taxonomy, the control vocabulary, and the thesaurus associated with it. And that's kind of the secret sauce of bringing that into the world of data management and knowledge management in the organization. I hope that helped.
Okay. Another question that we got was, did you use public domain ontologies like ICD-10 and SNOMED to create your ontology, or did you create your own from scratch?
A combination thereof. And those are, when you get into the ULMS, the Universal Medical Library Structure, very complicated RX norms, NOMED, MESH, and you got to know what to take out and what don't. So what essentially we do from our baseline is we enhance it and embellish it with those concepts. And so if you need something from pharmacy, you take a section out. If you need something from SNOMED, because they're very broad, but you can. You can start with those and start integrating and using that model as a primary source. We chose not to, so we're using it as a secondary source. And then there's local terms of what we call things, and local cities and hospitals and floors and all that colloquial stuff that we overlay that with the local concepts.
This is probably the point where we should point out that that Semaphore Ontology Manager allows you to link to external vocabularies like SNOMED, GNOS, and many of the others, and so you can link them to your vocabulary and then create relationships between your own vernacular and those external terms in order to be able to fully leverage the advantages of the structured vocabularies, and to make sure that you are fully leveraging, the linked open vocabularies that are available, because there are many of them for many different industries. And then we have some questions about your use case. How did you identify your initial use case, and how did you define the success criteria for that use case up front?
Good point. Everything's a little bit in this world, a little bit of leap of faith, but so we started out with, you kind of, in search in general, you start out what you know. In other words, you can't validate, you can find it unless you know. Really, it's a little bit cheating that where you're hiding it. And so we started out with essentially 40 reports that were germane to the area that the doctor was having a problem finding, and then modeled those out. And so you kind of do a controlled test. And can other people find them? Are they valuable, using the right words and so forth? And once you understand that from a controlled environment, then you start spinning off to the more unknown terms and the more unknown reports. So then, quite frankly, we literally took it around to various different executives, different user groups, had people test it, and then we released it, and then actually put a survey to it and said, are you able to find things better than you did before, just like we did on this questionnaire? And the overwhelming response was yes, but we did have some interesting feedback that people wanted more esoteric terms. And I'll give you one, for example. One of the hospital presidents wanted a term. He wanted to search by LWBS. LWBS means leave left without being seen in terms of a patient. Well, now we have to realize the granularity of the terms and the ontology and taxonomy probably needs some extension in understanding his perspective from an administrator versus some of the other things. So it's an evolutionary process, meaning you kind of start kind of like A/B testing. You start with what you know, and then you move to the unknown, and you keep validating that.
Here's a good one. What is the ROI, and how did you calculate it? I know that's a trick question, Phil.
Yeah. I don't think, and I'll speak in generalities. First of all, this is part of a bigger, obviously, metadata, big data management concept of tagging information, data, not just resolved around this particular product. So the risk was low and the rewards were high, both in visibility and documenting what we can deliver and how quickly we can deliver it. And if you get down to measuring knowledge in general, you have a hard time doing that. I think that's why knowledge management in the past has had a very bad reputation as a concept, because they really didn't have the tools and the methodologies to deliver. And we've done a lot of things like this in the past, and no one really says, well, what is the advantage of finding a person or finding a report or a piece of information, policies and procedure. But I guess maybe reverse it the other way. What would happen if someone didn't find it and someone died or got hurt or injured? They're going to come back to me and say, I couldn't find that document or I couldn't find the report. So I look at it kind of inversely, not necessarily how much money did we make, but what would be the traumatic event if something went wrong and they couldn't find the information that they needed.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly true of your pharmacy example. If the pharmacy newsletter contains information on recalls or newly discovered drug interactions or things like that, people can die
Yeah.
if that information is not available. I will say that one of our clients actually did an exercise to develop their return on investment for their system, and they are a life sciences company, and they are using Semaphore to organize all of the information that is created from the time that they start commercializing a compound through the regulatory approval process and then into manufacturing with the constant process improvements and whatnot that are going on. And as they were organizing this product body of knowledge, as they call it, they did a calculation that said that if they were to try and manually tag the 2 million documents that they were starting with, it would have taken them 30 man-years of, highly skilled, highly paid folks. So they were able to put a very quick ROI calculation in place. We've had other clients who have talked about it from the perspective of saving lives. What happens if we don't find this information? Somebody dies. That's really bad. Here's one, and Phil, I don't know if you guys used TextMiner as you were starting out, but did you do any noun phrase extraction to harvest terms when you were starting to develop your ontology?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Actually, we did, and we are, because that's how you start understanding, we'll call it what's in the vocabulary and what the hierarchy is and what the frequency is. So it gives you a good idea of either the patterns that have already been developed or the anomalies that are out there. And because the people that write these reports are very esoteric, and you'll get report XYZ CPT 01, and you're supposed to understand what that is. And we were going through that metadata that I showed you that comes with the report. So we go through that and look at the patterns that are deriving out of that, look at the ones that are close but need some improvement, and so we do interact with that as a first tier. So it is a combination of we'll call it structured and industry structured, and then there's always that next level of what are people thinking about when they build these reports, and then what do people think about when they try to search by them. Yeah, that's a great question.
This is probably the place to point out that a lot of our customers use our text mining facility to mine a corpus of content to suggest those concepts that are core to their organization. And so I don't know of anybody who actually starts with a blank sheet of paper anymore. You start with industry-specific ontologies that are available to you. You start by mining your own corpus to suggest terms that may need to be in the ontology, and then you develop from there. And I think we have time for one last question, which is, what is the effort to update the ontology systems, and what degree of autonomy do you have to do it internally?
It's very easy, and it goes back to the value proposition. I have 2.5 people that have been working on this that provides value for the 30,000 of our audience. So we can go in, say on the Ebola example, we can go in real time and add terms, add components to it. Right now it's centralized. We don't let other people do it. There are business rules on 4.0 that you can have separate ontologies, one for pharmacy, one for human resources, and have workflows and permissions associated with those. So it's very quick. We index and crawl every day, And so the information is refreshed. Anything that's in there with the new terms will be indexed and categorized and searchable with those new terms.
Yeah, this is probably the place to point out that one of the very attractive features of Semaphore, well, it's actually two, is number one, that you have complete editorial control over the ontology, and while the classification rules are automatically derived, you have complete editorial control over those, so you can tweak them or change them if you're not getting the kinds of results that you need. The other thing is that the user interface does not require you to have a PhD in linguistics in order to operate it. And so it's very, very easy to enlist end users in the process and to provide them with the ability to review concepts and relationships or to spin off a project. What you would do, I think, Phil, would be to have the end users work on projects for their particular components of the model and then review those centrally before committing them to the master model.
Yes, that's accurate. Like I said, we haven't gone that level yet, but that's the intent of distributing it so that these different domains can have access to their own information.
Yeah, so you do have the ability to involve the end users to a very, very great degree in the development of the model. All right, and with that, we are out of time.